Am I live now? I guess I am. Even when it counts down, it's still a little bit jarring, to be honest. Let me go ahead and make sure I have the chat up. Good. Okay, I know. I'm hopping on right on time. So I talk about two main subjects, if you weren't aware. They are like brand storytelling and content strategy. And I feel like even when I'm talking about content strategy, I'm also talking about brand storytelling. They, I feel like they're one and the same. Not completely, but there's so much overlap between the two. Um, and it's because, kind of like I talked about last week, about how accessible information is on the internet. Even before Chat GPT and Google Gemini and all these different tools really started to take over, you could find any subject, in 20 different articles about it. So I've always, with clients, even since 2018 when I first started with content strategy and content creation for folks, it was more than just what do I teach, and how do I make it engaging for people? It goes beyond that, right? Because, um, like I said, they can get that stuff uh, from anywhere, but they can't get your story. They can't get the experiences that you bring to they can't get um, the lessons and like you've learned, the challenges maybe you've experienced, or the challenges that your clients have experienced in these exact scenarios and situations. Even um, even 3 years from now, I don't think that AI will be able to replicate those things. It's kind of impossible. Like, there is something to be said about one of the things that make us human is, the fact that we go through life, we learn lessons. AI can't do those things. AI doesn't get discipline. Like, it doesn't um, keep trying at the same thing. It doesn't like fail in the same way that we do. And that story is always going to be relevant. We're always going to learn something from it. Think about the content that you prefer to engage in. I would hazard a guess that it's because of that voice that creator brings to it. That there's lots of different productivity creators, especially on YouTube, um, and even on LinkedIn as well. But each person has their own system that they've learned that works for them. They have, again, some people are more neurodivergent, so they'll have like productivity systems that will work for their brains. And there's some different people who are more paper versus digital planning. So they're all of these things are all on the same top, but they're bringing their own frame of reference to that. And this year, we're going to see, from a technical standpoint, we're going to see a lot of changes that are going to come through the pipeline with content marketing and content strategy because of AI. If you have not yet heard of the abbreviation EEAT, that is something that it's been circulating, but it's going to become more prominent. It's kind of how Google has revealed some of the ways that it chooses to prioritize stuff in the feed, like it's social media, in the search results, and it stands for. Ooh, I'm gonna have to do this on the fly. Experiences, and is the second one expertise? Maybe that's why I picked expertise. Authority and trustworthiness. But it used to be just EAT. But the experiences part is going to become so much more relevant because that is the part that, again, can't be replicated by AI. That's why we should care, because there's certain, and I think that there's already been a trend that we're going more towards of, hey, I'm not an expert. I'm just kind of revealing my journey as I go. That's a whole style of like YouTube channel, and it's very successful for a reason because it's still informative, it's still engaging, it's still educating, right? Like they're still teaching you the things that they've learned, but in a way that's like, hey, this is what I tried, this is what worked, this is what didn't. And that really helps us feel invested, right? Because we want to keep going, we want to keep seeing. We build that trust and that connection, like we talked about last week with the people that are watching. Again, it kind of creates that expectation with people as well about, oh, I'm going to keep seeing them like on YouTube, or I want to keep going and finding out what they're doing. One of the people who comes to mind on YouTube specifically immediately for me about this is Sarah Cannon's channel, Heart Breathings. If you are a writer, definitely check her out. And specifically the series that she did called that Writer Reset. So she is an author. She's also a content creator on YouTube and other places. But she had stopped writing. She kind of fell out of love with the writing for quite a while and hadn't published anything in a while and felt a lot of, shame around this because, that was a big part of, her identity, which is, understandable because I feel like that's part of writer is part of my identity as well. And she went through this whole long series of like how she is, falling back in love with the writing process without getting hung up on maybe the outcomes and the publishing and the deadlines and things like that. And it was very inspiring. And even though I haven't yet published, I still felt very engaged of like, will she be able to finish this next work in progress? How is that going? Is it, how is it different now than it was before for her? And again, other people may talk about like writing after a hiatus, but they're not going to do it in the same way. If you have learned and built that connection with people, with your audience, they want to see, how you do. Like, are you going to hit your goals? And again, not in a judgmental way, although, of course, there's always going to be critics and people who will judge you, right? That's just part of building something in public, is the fact that people will have their own opinions about it. But I think that is what stands out from other, types of content. And that to me is something that's that binge worthy, like that Netflix binge worthy type of content that I like to help my clients, my private clients with. So that is one part of it. I will say that one of the things that, like an obstacle that my clients often deal with is, oh, but it's not about me. It's about my clients. I don't want to make it all about me, which is not only is it valid, right? Because, we, obviously we can't talk about ourselves all the time. But, it is definitely a way to think through, okay, what are the parts of my story that make sense with maybe the results or outcomes I provide for clients? Like, how does my story mirror that of my clients? Like, how can I relate it back to what they're dealing with? Because even though I'm in a different position or maybe situation, how can it still be a way that we can like bring it back to what's relevant to them. And I think it'll be different for different people, and like I said, different situations or industries. But again, going back to my previous example with the writer reset that Sarah Cannon was doing, I feel like a lot of writers can relate to trying to build back up the habit of writing, although it wasn't really about that necessarily specifically, but also how to let go of your own expectations around your writing. I think that's a really common theme. So I think that that's one way of like, how does this relate back? How does it provide a good example for what I'm going through, or what my clients are going through, or customers or audience members, whatever you want to name them. So I think that that is a part of it. But also, because you are you, and like I said, there are other people maybe talking about different things in their own way, in their own perspective. It's also about, it's not about me, but what unique perspective can I offer that may not be out there? And from a personal level or perspective, I'll just talk about myself. Again, we talked about being neurodivergent. I am neurodivergent. One thing about me is I see a lot of people who are speaking directly to women, and there's also like a bro marketing camp. However, I am non-binary, so what can I offer that's maybe a little bit different, because I just see the world differently than other people. Not in a better or worse way, by the way. I'm not, again, not judging anyone for targeting women or for targeting a specific gender or group, because, that's what can make our content a little more relevant to specific people. But what about that? I'm a trauma survivor. I have survived domestic abuse in my adult life and some trauma in my childhood. And that colors how I interact with people every day. So how does that frame of reference and that experience, how does that boil back down to what I offer clients? And that's how I arrived to, for one, my tagline, which again is not necessarily an overarching content strategy, but is important because that's my messaging, is marketing that makes clients feel seen, not sold to. And that's because that's what I feel like everybody needs, is that connection. And that is something that I feel my life and my experiences and my career path before being a marketer or content creator has led me to. So we can talk about messaging. I feel I can go way into depth in that on another live stream or workshop or what have you. But that is how, my own experiences come forth. But let me take a quick drink of my coffee. I'm still drinking coffee at 1 p.m. Please do not judge me. So yeah, those unique perspectives to the content, and just being aware of them, right? Because how can I connect back to my ideal clients? How is what I'm saying and the way I'm going to say it going to be different? Which really also influences your voice. I know we touched a little bit upon your voice last time and about how that's important, but it's those perspectives, it's those experiences, it's that story that really forms the basis of what your voice is. I feel like in my previous career, I had to kind of shelve some of these parts of myself that I just brought up in order to succeed or at least fit into the corporate mold. So that's why with my voice, I'm not trying to do that. I'm going to say, I'm going to drop an F-bomb. I'm going to try to be real. I am going to be conversational, and not, and use my nerdy little references um, and just be authentically myself. And again, that's not saying that everybody has to have a very exact voice, but it's just important for people to feel like they know you. And I know people talk about that, and I feel like there's this misunderstanding of what that means. Like last year, yeah, it was last year. I was watching a lot of webinars that were put on by Dubsado and a lot of people who were talking about personalizing your client experience, which again is very important. But I know they probably didn't intend for it to be this way, but it felt like a lot of it was like, include gifts of your favorite things and your favorite IPs. And again, I'm sure they mean more than that, but that was one of those takeaways of like, you can do that. And it's like a GIF is still not going, unless it's a GIF of you maybe, but like, even though I love Schitt's Creek, I love Star Trek, I sometimes put a few GIFs in different parts of my customer experience assets and things like that. But like that still doesn't really build, I think, a connection like we maybe hope it will or expect it will. But that voice of like, this is how I would say something. This is why for a lot of folks who struggle to figure out, oh, I can't write, I don't know what to write, talk. Speak it into voice notes. Google Drive or Google Docs has a voice notes capability. Your Notes app has voice capabilities. All these different aspects. Because Seth Godin said this, and I say this in a few of my workshops that I put on, but I feel like it's always going to be a relevant quote. Is he's like, people complain about having writer's block, but nobody complains of having talker's block. And it just kind of clicked for me of like, if you're blocked, maybe you need to try to format. Which is why even though I'm a writer, love to write, there's just something to be said about content that's in the form of audio or like even video. Because again, it's building that connection. It's your voice because you are saying it. Even if you were to write a script, which I do for my like scripted YouTube videos. This is not scripted. I basically write the description and use that as my outline for this. But even if you were to script it and you have a teleprompter, I've used a teleprompter several times, and I'll still add these little things that weren't in the transcript or weren't in the script to begin with. Because again, it's just how I talk. It's how I relate. It's the analogies or examples that come up in the moment. I don't always include that part in my script. So one thing I want to check is just make sure I'm going to cover the things I said I would. So one thing I did this week on my email newsletter, and I did publish it. So if you wanted to go to that QR code or the code in the description, you can take a look. But I'm already an open book of a person in real life. Anyone who knows me or is friends with me will tell you that I don't know when to like not share. So that's an interesting thing about me is learning how vulnerable to be in content. And I can't say that I have that nailed down yet. I really don't. But I was very vulnerable and talked through some lessons that I had to learn personally. And even on LinkedIn, I posted about some of the lessons that I keep continuing to have to learn, and how, I thought I was kind of over comparing myself to other creators and entrepreneurs in the online space, and how I knew better than to like focus all of my time and energy on social media, which is a video that I will script and I'll probably put up next week, as long as everything goes well with that. But it was really vulnerable, and it was kind of like, I fucked up, and here are the ways I fucked up. And even though I tell people to not take on too many projects and not to put on too much onto myself and to make my expectations what I can realistically handle. And also, and this is going to be, I think, another scripted YouTube video, is how can I make the most minimum viable like launch or minimum viable content strategy and layer in the complexity later. I tell people that stuff all the time. All my clients during conversations with entrepreneurs and creators. And it's like I still have to learn it. I've been doing this stuff since 2017 with a previous business. This is not my first rodeo, and I'm still having to learn this. So there was a lot of shame around these realizations that I was having. And was it too vulnerable? I guess time will tell. Like I said, this is part that I don't have figured out, but I wanted to bring it up because I think everyone's comfort level is going to be different. Mine is like way over here, probably not as much as other people's. I know some people won't even talk about like certain stuff in their lives, and that's fine. Like be as comfortable as you need. But showing some of these lessons and showing some of these vulnerabilities, I think, is not only helpful from maybe a catharsis standpoint, if you're like me, but I think also in it humanizing us, personalizing the content, and helping people understand that there's so many times that I've seen other creators and I've been inspired by them, but like I've never really bought from them because there's this thing in the back of your head, or a thing in the back of your ideal customer's head, potentially, that's like, oh, that worked for them, but that doesn't work for me. I'm coming in too late. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. All of that stuff is comes up for us, and that's why there's these different obstacles that are going on with our ideal customers. And I'll definitely handle that in some sort of content. I might make a whole workshop about getting into your client's head and helping them shift some of those beliefs about themselves, because I think that's super important. And I could not go through all of that in one live stream real quick. But, all those things come up because we see people, and again, we see the highlights. We see, that's just how social media and content is. I'm gonna edit the transcript of this, so it's not gonna have all the extraneous stuff. But it's like that is so important, is for people to be like, I can do this too. I saw like the growth, Chanel, I can't remember her last name, has the Growth Lovers library, and one of the people in it who I know is famous, but I've never really like actually learned about his work, is Dan Coe. And when I read in her Growth Lovers library that he used to read his email newsletters and like ads, again, just like I say with my transcript, just add to it. And that was his first YouTube videos, or at least at the time. Again, I don't know when that was necessarily published, so I can't speak to if that creator is still doing that. It just like opened the floodgates of like, this person who I know has a humongous audience literally started off his YouTube channel with reading his email newsletters. I've been showing up on email fairly consistently for the last 5 or 6 weeks, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot for me, because consistency is one of the hardest things, right, of this whole journey. But for me, it was like, I need to rethink how I show up online, and what's the simplest way for me to show up, and for me to see this big time fit person or creator doing like, this is the minimum viable way that even they did it. It not only does it humanize them, I'm going to go look them up after this video, but it's also helps me to realize I can do that. If this person was able to build based on, this very minimum, like not minimum, because, it takes me time to write an email, but it's what I was doing anyway, it just completely changed it for me. It made me realize that, for one, I'm very conversational in email, so I already feel like I would have that really in a video scripted type of format. It's probably what's going to inform my scripted video next week. But, again, I can do that. It's not just an outlier. It's not just an exception. It's not just somebody who came into this platform early enough. It's not all of the things that we tell ourselves why we can't do this thing. We can't show up online. We can't be consistent, or we can't have, you know, we can't launch a course until we have X, Y, and Z lined up, or all those things that we tell ourselves. It's that vulnerability is really, I think, what will actually propel people into action, because they feel seen by you, they feel inspired by you, and it helps to kind of erode away some of those, mind trash things that we're telling ourselves. So as we close it out, I'm going to just kind of finish it out with that, just how to frame all of these things. So I feel like your hook, your that beginning aspect, that's where you can bring in that story. That's how you can frame the expertise or the educational aspect, and how you can kind of weave it throughout the content, right? Like you can use a story from yourself, or even maybe from a client with permission, of course, or with consent, and be like, this is the thing I'm teaching. This is the things I've learned through it. Here is, like, again, where I'm coming from when I'm learning this, or here is who I've learned from and who has influenced me, because again, that builds up that authority aspect of the EEAT. And as you finish it out, you can kind of show what's possible. Because to me, that's always how we want to start, maybe in a more, like, end it off with something more aspirational. Also, again, with an eye towards, like, what's that call to action, which I guess this time I'll do just to make it an example. I'm a little bit weird about, I don't know, but calling to action on my nurture live streams or whatever, because it's so off the cuff. I'm not prepared for it, obviously, like I would be with, like, a webinar or something. But I think that giving them that vision of what's possible is what makes people want to invest and continue learning. Like I said, just like the example we used in the beginning, with Sarah Cannon, is, I want to see the people I'm watching succeed. But I also want to know what they learned from it. I also want to know what that lesson is. I want to feel empowered to take action based on both, like, the educational part of it, but also the story part of it, right? Because, like I said, it's humanizing, it's building that trust and connection, and it sticks in your memory. Like, I think that particular series that she filmed was like 2, 3, 4 months ago, maybe. And I still think about it to this day. Again, that was the example that first came to my head when talking about this kind of content and about storytelling. So you want that to be memorable. You want that to stick out, because that will have people refer others to you. That will have people keep you at top of mind, and again, be more willing to, like, take that next step, that action. Which, for you guys, it's, like I said, it's in the video description. It's also on that QR code. Sorry, that word just didn't come to mind for me for a second. Go ahead and check out my creator profile, see some of that storytelling that I've woven through my content, and feel free to subscribe to my email list. That's really where, like I said, I'm the most raw and vulnerable, because it does feel, even though I've been publishing them, at least a few of them, so people get a taste. I want you to know what it's like to get an email newsletter from me. So that's why I kept a few of those, like, public. But even though that's true, I still feel like, oh, only people who have opted in get to read this. So let me go ahead and just not only just share what I know from, like, a content and brand storytelling and copy perspective, but also from, like, a life, like my journey, lessons that I've learned through this, and show you what it looks like, to implement some of these things that I teach. So go ahead and check that out. I look forward to, reply if you see any of those emails or those comments. So thank you all so much for joining me. I'm going to make this more consistent. I know that I say, oh, hey, I'm going to put up the promotion ahead of time. So be on the lookout for me to start trying to do that on Mondays or Tuesdays as I get more into the swing of showing up on video. It is sometimes a challenge, to pull all of this together, but I appreciate you sticking with it. So thank you.